Hi friends, I hope everyone's doing well. If you're new to my channel, I save leftover scraps of paper in this container and I use them for quick, small collages. I enjoy this practice because I use up the scraps of paper. I can create small collages when I have limited time, and it helps me to work outside my usual style. I have 10 pages left in this art journal, so my plan is to get all the pages completed. Let's get started. This is the first page I'll be working on, which has a painted plaid. It's actually a monoprint. When I was filming one of my monoprinting tutorials, I thought it'd be fun to add some monoprints to some of the pages in this art journal. There are 3 other pages with marks that I'll be working on in this video. Occasionally it's helpful to have paint or marks on the page so you're not staring at a blank page. I'm using the yellow and orange plaid as a guide when pulling paper. I'm choosing to pull blue and green papers so the collage will have contrast against the painted ground. I'm pulling too many paper options for this small collage. I like having options, but I'm not sure why I pulled so many. I'll be using Elmer's extra strength glue stick and scissors for all the collages. This green paper that has cutout arches is the inspiration for the collage. It will have a geometric design. As always, I'm being mindful of having light, mid, and dark values, even in small collages. Also, I'm thinking of ways to balance the design with different sizes and shapes. At this point, I'll add music while you watch me finish this collage. Then I'll add some final thoughts before continuing on to the next one. This will be the format for all the collaging sections. Here's the final collage. It's definitely busy. The map scrap is a light element that helps to balance the design because they're mostly mid to dark value elements. I made these marks when testing a red Posca paint pen to make sure it wasn't dried out. I don't want to cover these marks, so this collage will be very simple. As opposed to the first collage, I'm pulling a small amount of papers, yellows, greens, and blues. Even though the design is simple, I'm still being mindful of contrast and balance. Here's the finished simple collage. The design is balanced with the placement of the yellow and blue papers around the surface. The green dots add a subtle accent to the red pen marks. I kept noticing the scraps of yellow and red swirl paper when pulling papers for the previous collages. I wasn't sure at first how to use at least one of the scraps, but now I do. One of the swirls will be the focal point for this collage. I want it to be a strong focal point, so I'm pulling papers in blues and greens. The bright lime green paper will be used as accents to help balance the design since it will have a strong yellow and red focal point. The addition of the 3 bright lime green accent papers helps to balance the design while keeping the focus on the yellow and red element. If I had used yellow or red accent papers, it would have pulled too much attention away from the focal point. The next 2 pages have similar blue monoprinted plaid designs. My plan is to create 2 distinctly different collages. For this collage, I'll be using the radiating composition. It will have a strong design since the ground has a pattern and the radiating section will have different color papers. This type of composition is a great way to use narrow scraps of paper. Once again, I pulled more papers than necessary. When creating radiating collages, I like to have an area where the papers meet to be off-center. To my eyes, this is a pleasing design. Another busy collage, but I think it's balanced. You don't necessarily need to put a small piece of paper covering the area where the papers meet. I like to add it because I think it neatly finishes the collage. For this collage, I'll be leaning into the existing plaid pattern. I kept out the papers from the previous collage and pulled a few more. Again, more papers than necessary. Even though I have tons of paper options, I'm only using a few. In contrast to the previous collage, I want this one to have a simple design. I'm using the existing pattern as a guide for the placement of the other stripes. I thought about weaving the papers, but I wanted to see how the finished collage would look if the papers were laid on top of each other. The vertical papers will be glued first, then the horizontal papers. Here's a simple plaid collage. I'm happy with my decision not to weave the papers. I think the design looks good with the horizontal stripes on top of the vertical stripes. I'm changing up the color palette for this next collage by using muted colors. I wanted to use as much as I could of this old book page. My plan for this collage is to have a vertical composition that's off center. The old book page will be the only element on the right side of the substrate. The left side will have the other papers in a horizontal orientation. I decided to apply the glue directly onto the substrate. I was concerned that if I applied the glue directly onto the old book page that I may tear it. I'm using a tool to smooth out any wrinkles and to make sure the whole book page is evenly glued to the substrate. I want to mention that I typically change the orientation of text ephemera, so it's not easy for the viewer to read. I want the viewer to see it as an element, not text that needs to be read to appreciate the collage. I really like this composition style. I need to make a note to create more collages using this composition. It's simple but impactful. A benefit of this type of art practice is that the limited ephemera can lead you to find compositions, designs, or different color combinations that inspire you. I'm quickly checking the final 4 pages. All of them are blank, so it gives me a lot of leeway to create with any color palette and design. I'll be working with another strong focal point. This time it's the pink pattern paper. The other papers will be green and bluish green, and this muted lavender paper. My thought is that the muted lavender paper will be the accents. Similar idea to the bright lime green accents in the collage with the yellow and red swirl focal point. This collage focal point is subtle compared to the collage with the yellow and red focal point. Both are successful collages. Also, the two muted lavender accents helps balance the collage. The focal point is on the left side, while the two accents are on the right. My plan for this next collage is to use a vertical composition. The two text papers will be the ground layer. One is a scrap from an old dictionary, and the other is a list of streets from a Thomas guide. As I mentioned while creating collage 6, I'm placing both papers so it's not easy for the viewer to read the text. The other color papers will be placed where the text papers meet. This vertical color area will be slightly off center. Here's the finished collage. I really like the two vertical composition collages that use text papers. I need to make a note to work on similar collages, but in a larger format. I noticed this blue scrap a few times when pulling papers for the other collages. I wasn't sure how to incorporate it into a small collage, but I'm ready to give it a try for this one. I'm pulling bright colored scraps to contrast with this mid to dark blue paper. I'm cutting away more of the paper inside the blue scrap so there's enough room to add more of the bright colored paper underneath it. I didn't want it to be a perfect circle, more of an uneven round shape. Since the blue scrap will be the last element glued, I'm using it as a guide to make sure the papers underneath it are placed with enough of each color showing. Tearing the underneath papers instead of cutting them to size will yield an interesting look. I want some of the white edge of the torn papers to show. Here's the finished collage. I'm hesitant to say what it looks like to me. I don't want to sway your perception. I'm interested to hear what this collage represents to you. Let's continue on to the final collage. For this last collage, I'm changing up the color palette. I'm only using black, white, gray, and red papers. Here's the final finished collage. You can't go wrong with this color palette. I like the larger black scrap with the white swirls. It's a strong visual element in this small collage. The shape of the red and white paper is a good contrast to the straight edges of the other papers. Let's have a short wrap up next. This collage session using leftover scraps provided me with good design ideas. I was especially inspired by the 2 vertical composition designs using text ephemera. I encourage you to use leftover scraps in your art practice. Let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch this video. I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.